True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. I'm Jen Coffindaffer, and normally I know when I open up the show, I have so much excitement and exuberance. I'm so excited to welcome everybody to talk about the true crime subject that we have on hand. But I got to tell you, I'm not feeling that exuberance. I'm not feeling that excitement. And we're going to talk about why. First of all, for anyone who happened to catch Seth Rogers live that he did, not last night, it was the night before last. It was kind of a Christmas, send a message to Sebastian, what would you say, to Seth at this holiday, obviously very hollow time. It was really moving. It was sad. I listened to most of it. It was interesting because, of course, I had set this live up well before. I had no idea that Seth was going to be doing that. But I think that segment that they did kind of portrays at least how I'm feeling. And what we're going to do today, I've got copious notes here. We are going to go over where we're at in the case from minute one. We're going to look at the clues. We're going to look at what's been said, what hasn't been said. And I think the needle is pointing in a direction. And for anyone who follows me on Twitter, anyone who follows me here, you all know it takes me a long time to get to a point where I would ever even intimate that a victim family would be involved. It takes a long time for me to really look and digest everything. And I give everyone the benefit of the doubt in a missing persons case. If you look at the Kobayashi case, that was one case that, like most cases, you have to give the benefit of the doubt, particularly in that case where the father killed himself during the search. And by all accounts, the family was grief-stricken over the situation. I'm not going to digress. I'm just going to say that that's my mantra. That was my mantra in the FBI, and that is my mantra now. We, unfortunately, none of us have the information that law enforcement has. I know we all know that, but sometimes we just need to reiterate that. They have so much more that none of us have. But you know what? In this case, we have a lot. We have a lot to work with. I also want to say that in 28 years of investigating federally and in the private sector now, I am not a PI. I work as an expert witness. Occam's razor is about probably 99% true in my experience. Typically, these cases aren't the result of some huge, lavish conspiracy. They're not, they're typically pretty simple in terms of figuring out who had motive, who had opportunity, who had means, and where the facts particularly point. This case is no different. I want to start out, as I said, from the beginning, and I'm going to do a lot of reading of a lot of different things. One of the things I want to read here, this is the missing poster from the FBI. And I have a lot of faith in the FBI. Is the FBI perfect? No. Have there been bad actors in the FBI? Yes. Is the top management in the FBI over the last, I don't know exactly how many years, but has it become more politicized? 100%. Am I so angry to see some of the things I see being done in the Bureau and individual actors, some of the things? Yes. Having said that, again, the huge 90, 8 percentile, high percentage of the FBI, they are just street agents. This is what they do. They investigate. They're not for sale. And they put everything they have into cases like this. I think I also shared, and I'll make this quick, one of the last cases I worked on, I was a supervisor and oversaw a large part of this investigation, going into the house where the child went missing, trying to climb through the window that purportedly had gone through, being involved from A to Z in terms of what was going to happen, who was going to be interviewed, getting dive teams, where everybody was going, blah, 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 blah. I learned a big lesson in that case. It was an autistic child. The autistic child was living in complete and absolute squalor, not like the case here. The mother failed the polygraph on a particular question about whether she knew what had happened. Well, we found the child deceased in a body of water very nearby. The mother had failed because this particular autistic child loved to roam, and they put locks up on the doors and the windows, and she was remiss and had not appropriately locked up everything, and she knew it. And that is how the child got out. So she was feeling this sense of guilt, and she failed her polygraph over not knowing, pretty much knowing that he got out because of something she had done. But she didn't kill him. She had nothing to do with it other than negligence of not locking the door. Okay, I don't want to digress again. I just want to say that in these cases, and if you look back from the beginning to how this has evolved, always give the benefit of the doubt to the parents that are missing that child, to the parents that won't have that child there for Christmas. But this case has a lot to be said for itself. All right. Again, from the beginning, we're going to focus clean on Sebastian from this moment forward. I want to read this to you. Okay. Specific under details. A couple sentences. Sebastian Wayne Drake Rogers was last seen on February 26th, 2024 in the area of Stafford Court in Henderson, Tennessee. He was wearing a black sweatshirt, black sweatpants, and black square framed glasses. Sebastian has medical conditions, including autism. Yes, he had another medical condition that he was diagnosed with, very early on, but he was recently also diagnosed with autism. So for some people like to say, oh, he didn't really have autism. Yes, he had autism, and he had another issue as well, but autism was apparently his main diagnosis that may impair his ability to return safely without assistance. Let's examine that, because I am taking the FBI, and that's why I talked about why I have so much confidence in the FBI. I'm taking the FBI at their word. This is something that has always bothered me. I know it's bothered a lot of people, and that is these words. So unless they're lying, and I'm a very literal person, and I'm taking this at their literal word, was last seen on February 26, 2024. This doesn't say February 25th in the Texas Roadhouse video that we've all seen. It doesn't say that. It says the 26th, and it says in the area of Stafford Court. I find this very interesting verbiage. I always have. Again, I said we're going to start at the beginning. Things people may have forgotten, things people may think are out there because of things other people said, but that might not be accurate. We're going to just stick with the facts tonight. And believe me, there's enough facts that are at least pointing my needle for sure in one direction, okay? All right. Now, I want to jump forward. So now we have the 26th. We know we have independent corroboration of life, at least in our public circle, on the 25th from that Roadhouse circle. We saw him there. I want to touch a little bit about this video. Sebastian Rogers ate like he hadn't eaten in days. I'm not saying he hasn't eaten in days. I'm saying, why was that? One of the reasons could have been because he was off his medication. We know that Sebastian Rogers was medicated for his medical condition and that the medication he took suppressed his appetite. So, one of the thought processes is that he was not on his medication. And that's why we saw him eat in, like I said, what I noticed didn't seem the normal manner of how most people eat. Most 15-year-olds eat even, unless they're starving. And then that's the other possibility, right? We know for a fact that Sebastian Rogers was punished. They did not like him, meaning Chris and Katie Proudfoot, who Sebastian Rogers lived with. Katie Proudfoot was his mother. Chris Proudfoot was his stepfather. We know for a fact, because I just got done listening to them talk about this, they did not appreciate the fact that Sebastian Rogers would get up in the middle of the night and eat, take snacks, take treats. Now, Sebastian Rogers was not fat. He wasn't overweight. He wasn't at all on that side. I personally think he was very thin. His weight ratio to his height tells us he was thin. When you look at pictures of him, you can tell he's thin. The kid was thin. Now, the Proudfoots say they didn't let him, they didn't want him in the kitchen because he would get up in the middle of the night and he would eat snacks that weren't healthy for him, sweets. And then he'd take them back to his room and hide it. I'm going to talk about several what I'll call red flags here. I'm calling this a red flag. For anyone to think this is just normal behavior of a 15-year-old, I don't believe that to be true. I believe it's normal behavior for a hungry 15-year-old. If you don't want them to have snacks, then have in your cupboard popcorn, granola bar if you think that's healthy, fruit, cheese, salami, meats. Have the things that you think are healthy for him, but do not deny a 15-year-old growing boy the opportunity to eat when they are hungry. Do you see the oxymoron here? He is on medication that is suppressing his appetite, and yet his appetite wakes him up in the middle of the night to go eat, to get up and get snacks, and he's scrawny. I'm calling him very thin. That's my view. This is my opinion. You can differ with it. I feel very confident in those words, and I feel confident that that kid was hungry. I have never seen Sebastian Rogers eat, but this one time, Seth has seen him eat. Seth said this was unusual. It's his father. Seth raised him as a young boy. I'm going to leave it at that, but I'm hoisting up one flag that I believe to be an indication of things yet to come. All right. I want to talk about next some very important things that happened really very early on in the investigation. When I say early on, now we know, unless we're not going to believe the wanted posters, the information from the FBI, all the information put out there was he was last seen on the 26th. Why do I think that that might be accurate? Why do I think he might have actually been seen on the 26th, not the 25th when we saw him at the Roadhouse? I think so because I believe law enforcement here. What do I think is their because I want to, this is important. Katie Proudfoot said she put him to bed and she never checked on him after. Despite hearing noises, at first she says, well, it sounded like he might have been playing with something or had something. And then it became a noise, a loud noise, then it became a thud. It really challenge you all to look if you know, just so you know where I'm getting this from. I'm getting this from Katie Proudfoot herself, from digesting and perusing all her different statements she has made. It's progressed. What the thud noise, or sorry, I'm doing backwards. Thud, loud noise, sounded like he was playing with something, right? And she doesn't go in. She says, it's time to go to bed. Stop it. Whatever you're doing, get to bed. It's fine. I'm not going to judge her for that. But I find it very interesting, the progression of how she describes this noise. Let me tell you why. And I'm not saying this happened. I'm saying what I have seen in my experience. What I have seen in my experience is that people, when they are involved in a situation where they are either covering or involved in a child being hurt, that oftentimes they will foreshadow and say things like, I heard something. I heard a thud. I heard something noisy. Why? I'm not saying, again, Katie is doing this. I'm saying I've seen it in my experience, because they're trying to explain, if that child is found, why they might have bruises, why they might have an injury that could be life-threatening. Oh, that must have been when I heard that thud. That must have been that. So I'm not saying that here. I am just saying I've seen that. Secondarily, I want to say I am raising this as a red flag only in the fact that Katie wasn't consistent from moment one. This is your child that's missing, and you are making statements about it. Most people, it doesn't elevate from, well, I think he might have been, I think she first said something like messing with something. It sounded like he was, playing with something, to a loud thud, right? You start off with the loud thud. Oh my gosh, the night he went missing, I remember a loud thud. If this is the truth, right? When it's not truthful, you hear progressions and you hear missteps and misstatements. Now, giving her the benefit of the doubt, maybe she just didn't phrase it right at the beginning. Maybe as she thought about it, she realized, you know what, that was pretty loud. I probably should say loud thud. For you all to consider, but for me, it raises a red flag. So I've got another red flag standing up, just in terms of the veracity of Katie Proudfoot, specifically about what happened that night with the noise and Sebastian. All right. I find it very early in the investigation, on March 4th, very early in the investigation, that they had pretty much curtailed a lot of their main search efforts. And they specifically, meaning law enforcement, specifically came out and said, we have moved from a search situation to an investigative situation. Now, sometimes this happens because you realize, again, from my background, you realize that you have to examine where a 15-year-old could walk to in the amount of time you had to work with, right? So law enforcement gets on scene, they start searching. If we believe Katie, the last thud was heard at around 10 or so. So he had a long time that he could have left and gone quite a long way. You know the problem with that? He's not seen on any video surveillance cameras anywhere. And that's not coming from Jennifer Coffindaffer, specifically told to us by law enforcement. He was not seen on any video. This is another red flag. No video surveillance of Sebastian Rogers. You know, walking around the neighborhood, knocking from door to door, leaving and going and walking out on the streets and being picked up by somebody. That's what law enforcement is telling us. Okay. It's a red flag. And that tells me, as they well said, that's one of the reasons they're moving from a search to where he could have possibly walked or where somebody would have picked him up. We've looked at all this. We don't see him being picked up. We don't see him at all. Great. They say that they don't have any, and this is important. Law enforcement says, listen, we don't have any information that this is foul play. Words to that effect. We don't have any information that there's foul play, but everything's on the table. Okay, I'm going to tell you this right now. It's like when you hear law enforcement say things like this: they're a person of interest, as opposed to they're a subject, as opposed to they're under suspicion. I've talked about I talked about this a lot in the Harmony Montgomery case. When we're in the bullpen, when we're talking about these cases, you can call it potato, tomato, tomato. When we say this is our person of interest, I got to ask this actually on News Nation about Luigi Mangione. The question was, Jennifer, they're saying they have a person of interest. This was after he was arrested at McDonald's, but we didn't hear about any charges yet. So it was very early on, right after they took him and detained him. The question was asked, does this mean he did it? Is he a subject? They're not saying he's a subject, he's a person of interest. I'm saying absolutely he's a subject. You can call it a potato, you can call it a potato. Yes, he's a person of interest. And I'm equating that to this, meaning law enforcement will often say, before they're getting ready, not before, but when they don't know exactly what they have, and this was very early on, just within a week, they are not going to say they know there's foul play unless it's completely obvious, like they have somebody on video shooting the child, or they have somebody that called and said, I just killed my child, like we saw happen with the man who killed his 4 kids, right? Or I think it was 3 sons. We're not talking about a smoking gun case here. So no, law enforcement is basically telling you, generally speaking, it's all on the table. Just because we don't have it narrowed down to the exact foul play, it's all on the table. Now, for those of you thinking, okay, she's got 3 red flags over here, what is in the favor of there not being a red flag right now? I will say this: Connor Jack Oswald. That kid left. He was about a year and a half older than Sebastian. 2.5 years later, he was found. It's a lot different, though, in my mind, because of the suspicious circumstances in this case versus that case. You can look it up. And because of the fact that that kid was much, much older, was much easier for him and able to get around. He was more learned, if you will. So when you look at all of that, all I'm trying to say is not that it's not possible that he could have just walked out of that door, never been seen by a security camera. It's not probable. It's not Occam's razor. So I'm holding out because I'm a glass half full. I'm holding out the maybe 10% chance, 5, maybe 5, maybe, that he just walked out and no security cameras saw him, and that he'll be found 2.5 years from now in a Walmart and somebody will report it. I think that is extremely unlikely. Or that he walked out and perhaps someone picked him up and took him. But I'll tell you right now, there is no chance, in my opinion, that something nefarious has not happened to that child. That hasn't happened to Sebastian, period. And I say that because you can't just disappear in thin air like what we're seeing. I also want to say, I want to talk a little bit about, I'm going a little bit out of order. I want to talk about the FBI poster. I'm sorry, the FBI, not the poster, but the FBI $50,000 reward. I'm going to talk about 2 things. I'm going to read the verbiage that they used, and I'm going to reiterate when the FBI makes such a reward. In a case that isn't just a normal missing child. In other words, there are a lot of cases where a child, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, went voluntarily missing. And in some of those cases, a donor, parents, other people might give money to the FBI, and the FBI announces it and says, listen, we're offering this reward for a missing person. In other words, in a situation where is not believed any foul play is involved. That's a different situation than we have here. But I just want to let you know that does happen. But that isn't what we have here. I want to read you exactly what the FBI says the quid pro quo is. In other words, the $50,000, what they want. Okay, ready? The reward money is being offered to anyone who can help in Sebastian's safe return or the arrest and conviction of those responsible for his disappearance is being offered by the FBI Memphis field office, the $50,000, okay? The FBI is not offering a reward except for the fact they believe there is criminal activity involved. That's my belief. That's what I think they believe. As I've said, I'm caveating all this with maybe despite our red flags. Oh, by the way, this $50,000 reward by the FBI, that's red flag number 4. That they believe criminal activity is afoot. That Sebastian Rogers isn't just wandering around. That either somebody has taken him and has him, or has killed him, or that he never made it past the threshold of his house. But we'll talk a little bit about that because of the dogs, which I do believe strongly in. All right. So 3/4 scaled back. 3/7. Many of you remember this, the fake sighting, right? There was actually a child that looked so much like Sebastian Rogers, so much that Seth even thought it might be Sebastian Rogers, so much that many people thought that could be Sebastian Rogers. People said it was AI. AI. Anyway, I didn't think it was AI again. Check my traps with that. didn't turn out to be AI. It was a real person that just was a lookalike. So that was very interesting very early on in the case. I'm just kind of running through some of the main things that happened. 3/18. Whoa, that's a big day, right? That's been a lot right now on social media, everything that's going on, discussing the lights. I'm going to talk about the lights. I'm going to talk about the lights for this reason. The lights happened. They're on video. That video took place at 3:10 a.m. Okay. And I should say that 3/18 was when it all became public on WTVF. Okay. The lights were actually on. I'm sorry, I want to make this clear. 2:26 were the lights at 3:10 a.m. 3/18, March 18th, is when we in the public knew about the lights from 3:10, from the surveillance video, right? It got leaked. It got leaked. And a lot has been said about that, right? We heard from Seth. Seth said, well, could it be the trash truck? We've heard, or not heard, but seen with our own eyes. Does it look like a couple people out there with their flashlights? I want to read the specific details of that video as it was reported to us on 3/18, okay? I think this is very important. Let me see. I'm sorry. Oh, shoot. I thought I had that right handy. Essentially, it very specifically talks about how person one is seen. That's what it said. Person one. I'll post this on my Twitter later because I don't want to take time to look at it. Person one, and then person two comes into view. Then person one gets out of view. Person one comes back into view, and then the lights go out. Okay. That's the essential summary of what happened at 3:10 a.m. Was it a trash truck? Okay, first of all, this is very important. This is critical to understand that law enforcement has not said. Go ahead, go back and look at whatever you want, look at any news, look at anything you want. Is not law enforcement that has said it was the garbage truck. It is not anyone who said it's a garbage truck, except I think early on that might have been said by one of the parents. Okay? But we haven't heard it from law enforcement. To me, if I don't hear it from law enforcement, then I'm not giving it the credit that some people may. So I gave a shout out to Mob Crew because I can tell the time and energy and everything they've done to discuss those lights. We know that at least according to the reporting, it was at 3:10 a.m. But I always caution everybody, I can't tell you how many recordings that I have found. It all depends on the accuracy of the recording device itself. How was it programmed? Was it programmed, what time frame? East Coast, West Coast, Pacific? Was it changed when daylight savings happened? Blah, blah, blah. Did anybody even keep up with the time? But let's, for the sake of discussion, if we are to believe that is at 3:10, which is what the timestamp shows, and then I told you what happened. Two people there, one person kind of fades off camera, just out of the view, comes back, and then lights are turned off. If you're to believe that is legitimate, that's a red flag. That is something that law enforcement will take seriously. Now, if it's the trash truck, Riddle me this. Please call. Please reach out to, because it's already been done, J.E. McGarity, I believe it is, the trash service there. My understanding is the trash trucks enter the neighborhood at 5 a.m. That's my understanding. You can reach out to them and see what they say. That's my understanding. So I'm going to leave it at this. If it happened at 3 a.m, if there were two people with light sources walking around the back of that house, that's a clue that is very legitimate and that law enforcement must consider. If it was trash truck headlights, law enforcement knows that. So I'm going to leave it at that, because there could have been, like I said, it depends on the source. We know law enforcement went to the neighbor that had that recording device. We know they took that. I just want to leave it at that, because until law enforcement tells us what those lights were, which they haven't, I've looked everywhere, unless we hear it, not from any of the parents, but from law enforcement, we can't count on that as being accurate. And if the timestamp doesn't line up with that 5 a.m., which is when I believe they were in there, and again, please call the trash company if you don't believe me, and check back to that time, that date on the 26th. There's a problem. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I think it's self-explanatory. Again, Occam's razor. All right. I want to go to some more critical dates and law enforcement information. We know that the Cajun Navy very early on came to help with this investigation. They were already in the area because they were helping out with the Riley's investigation. So they came over. And we know that on 4/1/24, you can look back, April 1st, 24, they left because they were getting threats. Okay? I'm taking them at their word. I saw everything that came down. Oh, it's, we don't believe them. I've seen it all. I said back when it was happening, how pathetic that, that people are getting threatened that are trying to help. How pathetic that people think that in these cases, you don't have people help all the time that are mere volunteers. Happens all the time. You don't do a background check on them. They're literally walking and trying to find a dead child. That's really what it was, right? That's you're tracking through, foresty areas. You're force multiplied by volunteers such as the Cajun Navy. Okay, they left on 4/1. That was a big point, I think, in the investigation. Again, on 4/6, Craddock says there's no evidence of foul play. Again, I tell you how we talk in the Bureau and in law enforcement. Until you have that rock solid evidence, that rock solid case put together, is the appropriate thing to say while you're trying to figure things out. Okay? Notice we haven't heard anything like that in months. All right. Again, I said on 4/2, that was also said. I think it's very interesting that this was made into an Amber Alert. By definition, the Amber Alert typically means the person was taken. That's the whole idea. The bottom line is it was supposed to help a child right when they're taken. So everybody's kind of on the lookout, especially when you have a vehicle or when you have description of a child. So everybody's got their head on a swivel and can help police identify. That's the whole reason that happened, right? So I found it very interesting that pretty much straight away, law enforcement put out an Amber Alert. And I thought that was important because everybody's head was on a swivel and nobody saw Sebastian Rogers at all, not hide nor hair of him. 4-2 glasses were found, and law enforcement specifically came out and said those are not him, not his. Okay, 4-2, April 2nd, we knew that. April 3rd was when TBI joined Sumner County, and they began looking, this is very interesting, on the search of the Long Hollow Pike area. I thought that was interesting. So again, you still have some search efforts going on, even on 4-3. But again, according to the timeline, it was made into an investigation on 3-4. But it tells me that they might have had information specifically pointing to that area. And we also know that they kind of recanvassed again, making sure they didn't miss anything. And that's something you always do, recanvassing. I want to talk about the landfill search. 373, I believe. The landfill search is red flag. It's bigger than the other red flags. Huge, big red flag. Okay. What do we know about this search? We know that the landfill in Kentucky was searched for a couple of days. We know that this was, and I just read up on this because this was very confusing, whether it was the construction trash or whether it was the trash from the residential trash. It was the residential trash, according to 2 of the reports I read. Law enforcement said they didn't find anything that was worthwhile. But as I pointed back at that time, if you look at the Quentin Simon case as an example, it takes weeks. And remember, they had a big pointer. They knew exactly where Quentin Simon's mom dumped Quentin in a dumpster, exactly when that dumpster was picked up, and exactly where that dumpster would have been dumped. And it still took weeks. So in this situation, they knew apparently exactly when the trash was picked up that morning, and they knew that it would have gone to this particular landfill. And again, I am strictly going on the reports and what law enforcement said, and that they didn't find anything of interest. They also said this was routine. Back when all that was said, and believe me, I'm pro law enforcement. I think they're doing everything they can. I'm hoping that they will get close to solving this. I'm hoping they're seeing the red flags that I think all of us are seeing, and that we're going to see some movement in this case. I'm hoping. But nevertheless, there is no such thing as a routine search of a landfill, period, end of story. Now, I posted the pictures when it happened, and you did not see people all lined up in hazmat suits. I didn't see the FBI's ERT team pulled in that are experienced and qualified better than anyone to conduct a landfill search, because not only do you have to search north and south, east and west, you have to search up to down. So even though you search, then you get rid of those layers, then you search, then you get rid of that layer, then you search, then you get, and you go all the way down. It's unbelievable. So when you look at this, the other thing is they had to prepare a search warrant affidavit. That's where you swear to a judge. And by the way, the attorneys would have looked at it first, right? You write it out. Attorney's going to look it over, make sure that they believe there's probable cause there. And then you go before a judge and you swear that you think, in this case, indicia of a crime is there. Indicia of Sebastian Rogers is there, whether it's a body, whether it's cleanup towels, whether it's bleach containers, whatever it might be. You're swearing that the reason you're going is because you believe it's there. Now, I want you to consider this. So that's the huge red flag. I want you to consider this. These trash trucks that were utilized in this particular neighborhood, from my understanding, are those trash bins, containers, just like are in my neighborhood, right? They come by, they pick them up, dump them, right? My understanding is on many of these, and my understanding is on this one, is that they had ELD, electronic log devices on them. Why would you even have that? Well, you have to have that, right? You want to prove that the trash company is doing their job, that they're picking up the items, and some of them are capable of weighing trash, right? So if you have too much trash in a particular bin, you could be charged possibly, right? Too much trash, it could mess up their equipment, and maybe they don't take it. I know in our neighborhood, we definitely have certain things can't go in those trash bins, like paint containers. They can't be too heavy. They want everything in a plastic bag before it goes in the container, blah, 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 blah. My point is could that trash container have been unusual that helped them get to their probable cause? And this is what I mean by that. Could it have been heavier? If your trash normally weighs, let's just say 35 pounds, all your discarded items. But now you pick up and it weighs 135 pounds. We'll see. I'm trying to point out, so this is all I'm trying to point out there. This is something law enforcement is looking at. This would be the first thing I would look at. We know the trash was picked up that day. I would be calling J.E. McGarity, and I would make sure I understood when they're picking up. I would ask if they had that advanced equipment to tell me how much containers weigh, and I would want to know this. I have not seen, and I've seen it buzzing around, I have not seen anything from law enforcement saying that this company said that any containers from Sebastian's house were too empty. I'm going to make that clear. I'm saying that law enforcement looked into that. I'm very sure. And I'm also thinking that that could have been one nugget in the probable cause affidavit that could have led to them having probable cause. Okay. I want to make sure I get through all of this. I want to talk about the neighbor. Okay. I posted on this very early because a neighbor came out and talked about how Sebastian Rogers was treated. God bless that neighbor. Nosy neighbors help solve more crimes than you can imagine. And if they don't help solve them, they help prove them. So now I'm kind of turning a little bit to motive. Okay. I'm turning a little bit to motive. Why in the world would Katie and Chris Proudfoot not want Sebastian? First of all, he had very serious issues in terms of his autism. Okay? Why do I say that? They had a 15-year-old in diapers, people. They had him in diapers, going to school in diapers. That's a fact. Katie says that. I listened to her. She said, yes, I would put him in diapers because he wet his bed and he would have accidents at school. What I'm trying to say here is that's challenging for some people. Some parents are amazing when they have challenged kids. They have the patience of a saint. They work with counselors. They work with services. They figure out the best way to try to curb situations like that are happening, bedwetting incidents where they can't control their bladder. They work on all that. I'm not seeing that here. I'm not seeing that here. I understand. I understand because I have a brother who has cerebral palsy. I'm not going to get into a lot of everything about him. He's amazing. But he potty trained late. I mean, that was one of the first ways that we knew there were issues. One of the first ways was the fact that he was denied oxygen for 10 seconds because the doctor tried to deliver him breech. But aside from that, I'm not trying to digress. I'm just saying I have understanding of this in a personal way and in working cases. And I can tell you, some parents are great with their kids that are challenged, and some parents aren't. And I think that Sebastian Rogers was ill-treated. I actually don't think I know. And I think it'll all come out in time. A lot has already come out. There's a lot more to come out. But I want to go over a couple of things this neighbor had to say, okay? I've been over this once before, but it's worth repeating because we're doing a full summary, what I would call a pros memo spoken, prosecution memo, on what we know anyway. Okay. He said, meaning Chris Proudfoot to Katie Proudfoot, and excuse what I'm going to say. I hate this word. Again, I have a brother who is special. Come get your retard. And he hated and wished him dead. Apparently words like that were spoken. Sprayed him down with a power washer to the point that Sebastian fell over. If you don't get rid of him, I will. There were statements made and overheard. And red flag, another red flag, we're at number 5. It's a red flag for motive, a red flag for issues. When I say the red flags, I'm talking about your 15-year-old child who is wetting himself in school. I'm talking about your 15-year-old child who's wetting their bed still. I'm talking about a child that if they were verbally and emotionally abused in this way, that would explain when you see a 15-year-old with autism, high functioning, having these issues. All right. Let's see. We know, we know Chris Proudfoot had 5 wives. Okay, 5. We know the last wife, Nina. For those of you who did not get to see her revelations about Chris Proudfoot, about the abuse she saw, about what she endured, about everything that happened in that household, you can look on my Twitter because I summarized it. It's made private now. Some people might, I'm sure nothing ever disappears. So it's around. If you watch that, make sure you're sitting down and you're prepared to hear what it's like to listen to somebody who's abused and has experienced a true domestic violence situation. I said at that time, I believed her. I believed her then. I believe her now. And I am telling you, just like people who don't abuse, who don't think it's right to beat others, who don't think it's right to hit, who don't think it's right to emotionally and verbally, do that, you don't change colors. You can get counseling You can get counseling. You can seek help. There's always help to a degree. But you don't just stop oftentimes. Red flag number 6. His past domestic violence against others. All right. Let's see. Okay. Geofencing. Geofencing is something that is done to determine what cell phones are being used in a particular area where a crime takes place. This is one of the number one tools that law enforcement uses to see who was there when a crime takes place, essentially. Or if they have a missing child, who might have been in that area. I can guarantee you law enforcement used geofencing. They have not came out and said what they found. It'll be telling. If there were any foreign phones in and around Sebastian Rogers' house, that's a big clue. That's a big clue that somebody came and got Sebastian Rogers or would have been involved in his disappearance, in my belief, if I see that in and around his house. But you know what is also a clue? If I do geofencing and there's no digital footprint of somebody that wasn't supposed to be there, that's also a big clue. We don't know what the results are. Law enforcement has not told us. At the time of his disappearance, it is our understanding, what we know now from the Proudfoots, that Chris Proudfoot was working as a crane operator at the Memphis St. Jude Children's Hospital, which is approximately 3 hours and 21 minutes away, okay? Now, nobody keeps track of you if you're a crane operator in that environment. Yes, maybe if you're working oil rigs or you're working in some other situation where what you're doing, you're currently working, you can't just walk off the job, right? But did he go home that night? Law enforcement hasn't said that as far as I know. Not law enforcement. Same with the polygraph. We've heard a lot. The only polygraph that we know for sure that I saw and read about was Nancy Grace having an FBI agent retired give Seth one and pass with flying colors. We know about that one. We know that Chris Proudfoot, because I saw this, said, come on, bring it. Let's get a date. As far as I know, he never was polygraphed. They never got that done. So I'm just repeating what we know, that we've seen with our own eyes. In other words, is it possible that Chris Proudfoot could have left where he was? It was 3 hours and change away, and been there the night of the 25th. Is that possible? We don't 100% know. I mean, it's possible. It's physically possible, but we don't know because law enforcement hasn't told us. So unless somebody knows something I don't know, and I can't go by what Chris and Katie Proudfoot say, I'm sorry. I'm not going to go with that. Unless we see, no, for sure, that he was at this job site, or I shouldn't say the job site, he wouldn't be there in the middle of the night, I don't believe. But in that area, because he was working, there's, we just don't know that. But purportedly, he was there 3 hours and 21 minutes away and didn't find out about this until Katie told him. And in fact, they talked about it on the phone, talking for 3 hours, kind of during this time frame where maybe Sebastian could have been disappearing, right? because Katie says she went to bed midnight something, right? And that she was talking on the phone prior to that. Law enforcement has all that. We can't solve this, but law enforcement has solved where everyone was at least their cellular devices, and where whether his truck was in and around. And I saw something very recently that looked like a little slip up by Chris Proudfoot talking about his truck being there. I can't say it's strong enough to say, but and then he came back later and kind of tried to clean it up. I don't know. I don't think we should speculate on this point, because law enforcement knows. Law enforcement knows. So if they 100% could conclude that Chris Proudfoot had nothing to do with Sebastian Rogers' disappearance, I am just going to say I'm surprised they haven't come out and said something. We know in several cases, one of the cases I followed very closely was the Michael Vaughn case. And in that case, the FBI agent, the supervising FBI agent, came out and they said they are not involved. They're not involved. The parents are not involved. We know they aren't. So they came out and said that. In the Idaho 4 case, for those of you who follow a lot of true crime, that's the Brian Koberg is accused of killing 4 college students. In that case, because there was so much ridicule against the boyfriends of the roommates and other people, they came out and said, no. Guess what? Almost every week. Nope, that guy's not it. Nope, that girl's not it. Nope, it's not the, Uber Eats. No, it's none of these people. And they do that because they don't want these people harassed. It was horrible what was happening. I'm saying in this case, we don't see law enforcement really coming out and saying anything, except I should say that they did come out very recently and make a very strong statement. And that was on, I think I have the date because it just happened. Oh, I didn't write the date down. It just happened on whether the person with the green hoodie at the Texas Roadhouse was in any way involved in Sebastian Rogers' disappearance. He is not. I can tell you for a fact, and law enforcement came out and said it. They interviewed the person. They know who the person was. The person came in. They looked hinky. They looked hinky as crap, because you know why? They came in and they went straight to the restroom, and they go in the restroom. They come out and they never buy anything. When I see something like that, I'm just saying what it usually points out to me. I usually think that that is somebody who might be homeless, or somebody who doesn't have a lot of money, and they come in and they use the bathroom. Sometimes also it could be a person that really needed to use the bathroom, and instead of going to a convenience store, they pulled in and they ran in and went, and then they left. But it doesn't matter what the circumstances were. What matters is that law enforcement has clearly said they had nothing to do with the abduction or the harm to Sebastian Rogers. So that's good to know that. Out. Not important. But that Texas Roadhouse clip is important from my view, and I think from a lot of yours. Katie Proudfoot, the way she acted in there's a couple pictures snapped. She's on the phone constantly. Definitely not at all engaged with Sebastian Rogers. Not at all. Maybe parents do that. I don't know. Usually it's the kid that's on the phone and the parents that are eating, and the parents are saying, can you please get off that phone? Let's have a little family time. This was just the opposite. This is somebody that's eating like it's their last supper, and the mom is on the phone and looking all around like she's looking for somebody. Is she suspicious that somebody's looking at her? Is she trying to see if somebody was going to show up? I don't know. I can tell you this is not normal behavior. I can tell you this. I think that the timing is very interesting. The other timing that's very interesting is that the divorce papers, my understanding, were filed at the same time that Sebastian went missing. I just find that odd. Is just something that I'm going to point out. You can take it or leave it. You can take it as, you know what, these are consequences. But not consequences. This is just circumstantial. It's just a coincidence. We could take it as that. But I can tell you in something like this, a lot of times when if something terrible happened to Sebastian, and if that was planned, to me, that date's important. And if I were making this case, and if law enforcement has proven that something nefarious happened to Sebastian Rogers, that date could come important. And I would definitely introduce that, ask the prosecutor to introduce that as an exhibit, because it could be sending a message. I want to talk about another thing to do with motive. This was very important, I think, when this came out. And this is out not from law enforcement, but we know it to be true because we've seen documents. And that is that apparently Sebastian Rogers suffered sexual abuse from an outside individual who was allowed into the Proudfoot home when Sebastian was younger, several years prior, about around 6-7 years prior. Another red flag. I'm going to call it a red flag because of this. When you have somebody who has special needs and autistic, you have to take special care that they're not in and around someone who could take advantage of them. And to allow that, to me, just shows not a lot of care and concern for the child. It's just back to the food, back to the skinny, back to the how the child was, apparently, according to this neighbor, how this child was treated, Sebastian meaning, and then now this put him in a vulnerable situation. You just add up a lot of this, and it's concerning. Another very concerning thing that occurred right in the middle of the case was Sebastian and Katie took off and left their home. For those of you who don't remember that. That one was really something. They took off and left. I can tell you that is very abnormal behavior. Somebody who's worked missing cases. This is not what family does. Family stays right there in their house in case the person returns, in case the person escapes, in case the person is somehow able to find their way back to their home. Now, the reason it was purported that they left was because they were receiving threats. Well, they have video surveillance. They could contact law enforcement, let them know so there could be increased patrols. Katie Proudfoot was not a shivering violet, or what do they say that, a shriveled violet, somebody that's just, yeah. She's in the Navy. She was in the service. I understand Chris wasn't around. Listen, I'm not judging here. I'm not judging. I'm saying from my experience, this is abnormal, and I'm raising a 7th flag. I think I'm on 7. That is very unusual to leave shortly after your child goes missing to pull up stakes and leave that house. I know all the excuses. Husband wasn't there. He was going to, I've never understood that either. But no, I'm not going to go there because that everybody has their own way of dealing with things, but I'm making a point out of leaving your home and not having a place for your child to go back to. I think that's significant, and that is a red flag for me. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. Oh, I thought this was interesting. 3 things here that Chris Proudfoot well admitted to. 1, according to Katie and according to Chris and according to Seth, Sebastian loved his snake, his ball python. Now, some of you might think that that's really weird, especially a lot of people are terrified of snakes. I can tell you, my son, same age as Sebastian, by the way, he loved snakes. He fell in love with a ball python. We named it Jackie. And Jackie, the ball python, was his pet for years. He loved that snake. Chris Proudfoot got rid of the snake because he said Sebastian wasn't taking care of his ball python. So your kid loves this thing, loves this pet, and you get rid of it. Teaching him a lesson. He's not taking care of it, it's out. I would just say this for all of us out there. How many pets have you gotten or knew you were going to get? Puppy, kitty, it's usually not a ball python. And your child is a child. You know, when I say a child, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, underage, and autistic, and you don't think you're going to be taking care of it? Of course you're going to be taking care of it. Kids are just learning to take care of themselves. They're learning to get up and pour their cereal. They're learning to get up and make sure their backpack's together, make sure they don't forget anything. Doesn't this remind you a little bit of Ruby Frankie? You know, remember Ruby Frankie was this mother who mistreated her kids. They ended up being found bound and, you know, completely emaciated with you know, horrible wounds around their hands. I'll tell you what this reminds, not that part of it, but the part of it where one of her children went to school and forgot to bring the lunch. And so she said, sorry, tough love. She doesn't get to eat today. And, you know, school officials were like, oh my gosh, that reminds me a lot when I hear of the punishments and especially an autistic child. But let's talk about another one. So you get your kids something they fall in love with, and then you take it away because they're not taking care of it, which you well knew they probably weren't going to, instead of helping them learn how to take care of them and taking that time to teach them. Come on, we're going to go right now. We're going to get the rat. We're going to put it in, you know, we're going to clean the cage, whatever it might be. Second, he well says he beat him with a belt. He's an autistic child. I don't know what else I can say about that. This isn't guessing what he did. This isn't, I'm not throwing what I think out. I'm throwing what he said he did. He makes sure to, you know, with his pants on. All right. He beat his child with a belt. He's an autistic kid. Use your hand. Was the hand just not enough? Did you need to incite that much fear so he could see you coming at him with a belt? How is that teaching? It was supposedly because he lied. And so you beat your kid with a belt because they lie? Is that the proper punishment? I don't know. I'm not judging people who use corporal punishment, but when you have to start using tools and instruments, fly swatters, belts, I've seen it all, spoons, you know, pliers, all the ways I've seen kids be abused. When you have to get tools involved to discipline, it's a big problem. And when they're autistic, it's a bigger problem. So red flags right here, this little group I'm doing, these 3 things that he's admitted to. His whole spiel about what he does when Sebastian doesn't clean his room, it's very interesting. Clean your room, Sebastian. Sebastian cleans it. Sebastian comes out. Chris Proudfoot goes in, and he doesn't think it's cleaned how it should be. There's things on the ground that shouldn't be there. There's things out of order. He warns him, if you do that again, I'm throwing all your things that mean a lot to you, like the snake, I'm throwing it all away. Next time, Sebastian cleans his room. Chris Proudfoot, I bet he was salivating. Chris Proudfoot goes in there, throws his stuff away. Now, I will say, my mom, if I left anything around, she was an absolute neat freak. Everything had to be perfect. And if I didn't clean up, she would take what I didn't clean up, keep it, and I would have to earn, like with my allowance, and buy it back. Here's 10 cents, Mom. You're right. I left my dirty clothes. I didn't throw them in the laundry hamper. I get that. I don't get taking away from a child things that mean things to them, because it's just as important as what is important to Chris Proudfoot in his life. And that's what he did. So just take those three things, just these three examples. This is emotional abuse, in my opinion, and physical with the belt. That's my opinion. And it lines up exactly with what the neighbor said, how he was treated. It lines up exactly with what Nina said, the domestic violence that was used by him in the past. This lines up for motive. It lines up for predisposition. Now, if Sebastian Rogers ends up being found, I personally will make the biggest apology I can to bringing up all this dirty laundry. However, I will still say that child shouldn't be around him. The child shouldn't be around him. We know, not from law enforcement though, so I want to caveat this, but it's our belief from what Seth Rogers' camp has said that there are multiple CPS reports. And we also know, because I heard it straight from Chris Proudfoot, that he acknowledged CPS issues. He acknowledges it. He says in both states. So now he's backing up some of these things Nina's saying, and backing up what the neighbor said, and backing up the belt, and backing up all these concerns we have. Chris Proudfoot said it himself. Now he, downplays it. Yeah, they came in, they closed it. It wasn't a big deal. They did one was open just because every time there's somebody goes missing, you automatically do a report. I can tell you that's wrong right there. That's just, I don't know why he said something like that, because that's just patently not true. You see how it's adding up my red flags? I got 7 or 8 in a row now here for your consideration. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. Let's see. All right. I think I touched on everything. For some reason, there's something out there that I'm worried I didn't touch on. I think I got everything. I'm going to go to your comments next, just to see if you have any questions or comments. I definitely want to see those. Checking one more page. Okay, I think that's it. So what's the bottom line here? The bottom line is, succinctly before I get there, is I'm really concerned about Sebastian. I'm really concerned. I'm really concerned whether he's with us. I hope the red flags are just red flags regarding mistreatment and abuse, and nothing far worse. So that's why I'm not in my normal cheery mood. Even though I have on my cheery sweater, I'm not in a cheery mood tonight. All right, let's see what we got here. Oh, no shoes. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay. Yes, that's why I got to read these comments, because I knew I was missing a couple things. This is what we know from what Katie Proudfoot says. No shoes on. Now, for those of you who have teenage boys, I can tell you right now, my kid has so many shirts, so many sweats and socks and shoes. I mean, he's got a lot. In fact, the other day I said, what you don't like or won't wear, I want you to put it in a pile, and we're giving it to charity, or we're giving it to the people under the bridge. But I'm tired of coming in your room and you've got all of this stuff. And when I do the laundry, I see 5 things. I see his favorite clothes. He's got his favorite warm sweats he likes. They're fuzzy on the inside. There's like 3 of them. He's got this same red shirt that he wears to church. He's got the school clothes that he wears because they have kind of a uniform. You know, you have to wear polos. So he has the same 3 or 4 polos he likes. The same. I don't know about your kids. Maybe my kids wear. He's literally got 6 or 7 things he likes, and the other 50 things he could care less about. Do I know what all the other 50 things are? No, no way. In fact, no. He threw some of the stuff in the pile. 2 things were mine. So I didn't even know they were in there. But this is different with Sebastian Rogers. He apparently had a very limited, very small wardrobe. His shoes, I think they said 3 pairs. That is just shocking to me. My son has like 15, but you know, because he's got all his different sports shoes, and then he has his runaround shoes, and he has these, whatever. He's got a lot of shoes, and then he's got shoes that, you know, he doesn't wear very often, church shoes, boots, whatever, but he's got them. But according to what we know, Katie Proudfoot says, I know all his shoes. He doesn't have very many, and they're all there. Okay? Then she's very specific in what he was last wearing. Very specific. I found that odd too. Can I tell you why? Because I don't watch my son get ready for bed. I go in and I kiss him goodnight most nights, or I make him come kiss me. Get in here and kiss me goodnight. But I don't sit there and watch him, what clothes he's going to change into and wear in bed. I really don't. Like I said, he's the exact same age as Sebastian. So she remembers, and that's fine, because maybe a lot of parents know what their 15-year-old wears to bed. She seemed to know. But if, only if, something happened to him that night that these parents are responsible for, what if in their haste, they didn't plan this very well, and Sebastian's gone? Again, law enforcement went to that dump site. Trash is taken away. She's like, oh my God, he didn't have his shoes on. Got a report he doesn't have his shoes on. And if he would leave, got to make sure that flashlight, I got to talk about the flashlight. I'm only going from experience. Not saying Chris and Katie did this, but I'm telling you from experience. I work with Occam's razor. I work with things that don't make sense. Give people absolutely the benefit of the doubt. And I look at possibilities. So tonight, we're looking at possibilities. All right, let's see. Odd to decide to leave in February in Tennessee where it's cold without your shoes on. Just saying. And supposedly he got bit by fire ants and really hates to be without his shoes. Okay, touched on that. Yes, just not complicated typically. Yeah, no jacket, 25 degrees. Again, if something nefarious happened to him, what was he really wearing? Was he really wearing what they said? Right now, all we know is we have no Sebastian, and Christmas is around the corner. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I read that. So the flashlight that he had, just to be clear to everybody, it was like a keychain flashlight. And I don't even know if it worked or didn't work. I've seen various things said, but you know, this little flashlight, like the ones I have, they last like 5 minutes, right? You turn them on, you turn them off, you go back to get it, and whatever you're messing with it, you turn it on, it never works again. They're not meant, I don't think, for the most part. I'm not talking about the nice ones. I'm talking about the one like they describe he had. But anyway, supposedly, according to Katie, he had this little flashlight, barefoot, no jacket, just a sweatshirt and sweatpants in freezing weather in February, in the middle of the night. All right. Hey Jude, I didn't know the divorce papers were. Yes, that's something that's, I think, very important. I believe let's see, I might have those exact dates really handy here. I hate to ever hold up these things, but let me see if I can find the exact date. I don't have that exact date right here, but it was either filed the 25th or the 26th, which coincides with the disappearance of Sebastian Rogers. So yes, it does. And certainly if law enforcement comes and says this was a pre-planned situation, not just something that happened accidentally, not just something that, the date's just very, very interesting to me. Just locking it back away, not as a red flag, but interesting as this case develops, if anybody ends up being charged. Yeah, so, it was the 26th. Thank you. Okay, so somebody knows that exact date. I couldn't remember whether it was the 25th or 26th. It was the 26th that those divorce papers between Seth and Katie were filed. And like I said, if this ends up being charged, if there was nefarious action, if this all turns out to be that could have a lot of meaning, is my point. All right. Let's see. Can you touch on what the school teachers have reported? Ooh, that's such a great question. I have not read a lot about the school teachers, if they have come out and said anything. I've seen pictures and really that's it. I need to look into that. I haven't. I don't know if they're talking. Let's see if anybody in chat knows. Does anybody in chat knows whether they are talking? No. Oh, yes. Thank you, Cassie Roku. So Cassie Roku talks about the scratches. This is so important. If you look on Chris Proudfoot's arm right after this. Okay. I remember at the time saying, okay, I'm not going to say those are bite marks. I am not a bite mark specialist, not a scratch specialist. So I try to stay in my wheelhouse of what I know. But I really want you to look, you all individually. I might have posted it on my Twitter, but if not, it's out there. And these are it literally looks almost like a rounded, like the bite my teeth marks a little bit. I hate to say that. I'm not a bite mark expert, but it's concerning. Because one of the things, again, that you look at in law enforcement whenever something like this happens is, were there any, if this is nefarious, if they hurt Sebastian Rogers, you want to look at, are there any signs of the perpetrators on them that might show that he did anything to fight? Usually, oftentimes, unless they're just sedated or tased or something like that. I'm just talking about other cases. A lot of times the child will fight. So what do we see here? And what does Chris Proudfoot says? Well, Chris Proudfoot talks about their two dogs, and he says, and this bothered me how he says this. I'm just going to, this bothered me, his explanation. He's like, I like to roughhouse. I'm pretty, I get down on the ground. I'm roughhousing with him. And I basically talks about how he instigates these interactions with them where they scratch and bite and where they, kind of come after him. He instigates them, he says. He says he gets down and he likes to get them all riled up or whatever. Listen to the problem I have with this explanation of how he got that on his arm. I have a little bit of problem with that because when people get into a lot of detail about something they're concerned about like that, that is a red flag in law enforcement when we're interviewing. Maybe I should have my flags have different colors. Let's say an orange flag, not quite bright red, but something we look at, because typically people don't go into a lot of explanations like that. In other words, this should have been the answer, a normal answer from a normal person. Like, oh God, I was on the ground roughhousing with my dog, he scratched me. But they don't do all that. That is a sign typically of deceitfulness. As just from my experience, you can take it or leave it. That's from my experience. There was one other thing that reminded me of, though, that I wanted to talk about with Chris Proudfoot. There was one other thing. Oh, hopefully somebody in chat notices it, because I thought it was very important and I did not bring this up yet. Anyway, I've probably forgotten it. Yes, deception, exactly. What happened with the lady that implicated CP? Oh, these are going so fast. Is this okay? Oh my God, I'm not good at reading these. All right. Well, anyway, and then there's some mean comments too. The bottom line is, I just wanted to come out because it's right before Christmas. There's no Sebastian Rogers. I truly believe law enforcement is working their tail off on it. Oh, I know something that really bothered me. This is the last one. Luminol. There was no luminol. If we're to believe Chris Proudfoot said they did not do any fingerprint examination and they did no luminol examination of their home or their cars or anything. I'm just citing what Chris Proudfoot said. I think they were remiss if they didn't. We get into just like a John Benet Ramsey case, Summer Wells case. You have to treat these cases, especially with an autistic child or a real young child. You have to treat these cases like there's a crime that's been committed. You can't treat these cases like they just voluntarily left initially. You have to treat it as if something bad happened. And then you work backwards, obviously, if the parents have alibis, if there's no sign of any issues with those parents, things like that. If you can work to eliminate, then you work the circle out from the inner circle to the outer circle. But in this case, I don't think they ever got too far beyond the inner circle. And I don't understand if it's true that they didn't use any luminol. I don't understand that. All right, let's see. All right. I think that's it. I want to touch on this. Somebody was so nice. and gave Nick the Hat. Thank you. Nick the Hat gave a $4.99 donation to the program. Thank you so much. And I want to give a shout out to both Nick and to Dog the Bounty Hunter, because they're working on this case. I know that's a fact. They're, entertaining what tips come in. And a lot of people in cases like this, I can tell you from my experience, they don't want to call law enforcement. They're afraid that their phone is going to be tracked, and then somehow it's going to come out on a report, and they want to be anonymous, and they will contact dog. They will contact the numbers that are given, and that's because they don't want their name out there. So that and the notoriety. I mean, Dog the Bounty Hunter has literally millions of people who adore him, and they followed him when he was young, when he was tracking down fugitives, and they believe in him. And anytime you have millions of people that are paying attention to you, I mean, he has, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands just on Twitter, on X, hundreds of thousands. I don't know how many, but it's hundreds of thousands. They're paying attention to him. And that means they're paying attention to Sebastian. So let me see if I can get this one to come out. So I just want to say thank you to them, and thank you to anybody in the chat, anybody listening now who has actually put this. Thank you so much, Alice. Alice, thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Lil Red. Thank you so much, and Merry Christmas to you, Little Red. What a nice donation of $20. That is so very nice. Thank you so much. And Castle, thank you very much. 1999, she says, Jaykov's SAP truck pinged in the neighborhood when he said he wasn't in Tennessee. Yes, that's the one I was talking about. There was a ping that was supposedly there that then I heard Chris try to kind of explain. I think that is going to be very important again, because when you're law enforcement, and let me click on this, when you're law enforcement, you want to specifically look at inconsistencies from statements to what is the reality from your facts. Yes, hey Jude, Sebastian Strong. Let's see, $4.99. Thank you. Can't you culture? Yes, they could have cultured his arm, meaning to see if there were bite or scratch marks from a dog as opposed to a human. I don't know that they did that, but nevertheless, I hope that they took a picture of them. And Lisa, thank you so much, and God bless you, and Merry Christmas to you. I can say that they can. But in a case like this, I'm not sure they did. If they didn't do luminol and they didn't do fingerprints, I can tell you they didn't swab that. But hopefully they took a picture of it. And if not, we have pictures of it, because that could help them prove or show that there might have been a struggle leading up to what happened to Sebastian. Yes, Christmas wishes. Oh, Betty the Bullhorn, $4.99. Thank you so much. And look, Betty is another one who has a huge following, who was willing to actually risk a court case, I think, in her fervor to try to get this case out. And for everybody who has done that, I just, who's put Sebastian first, I thank all of you. Laura Quigley, thank you so much. $19.99, that's so nice of you, Laura. Laura is one of the, she's one of these people that so much is in the missing community, so much is in the true crime community, and really trying to make a difference. Reposting every time, the one thing everybody can do, I always say, is when we have somebody that we know is missing, that law enforcement has said is missing, that we have missing posters on, that we have some details and we post it, please repost, because you just never, it proliferates and you never know who that might reach that might know something or has seen something, and it just gives them great awareness. And that's the kind of person Laura is. Thank you, Laura. Listen, I don't want to belabor too much more. I want to make sure nobody else has anything they wanted to say. Again, yes, Luna says, thank you, Bullhorn Betty, for everything she's done, because even amidst what happened in terms of a court case, she's still advocating for Sebastian, and we all should be fervently. So my hat goes off also to Seth Rogers. I don't know if he's in here. I don't know if I want him in here, because I think I've been really honest with the way the needle is pointing. And if that needle is truly pointing in that direction, you know, let's just pray somehow Sebastian is returned to Seth. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Panda. That's really sweet of you. Happy holidays to you and your family too. Another one that's always part of the True Crime Circle. To all of y'all. Oh, there's one other. I'm just gonna want to make sure I'm very, yes, prayers that he's returned. Listen, I just want to really say thank you for all of you who came on. And I'm just trying to be honest. Mob Crew, shout out to Mob Crew for what you did with the video, and to everybody. All right. Thank you again, everyone. A very Merry Christmas. I won't see you before Christmas. And keep Sebastian and all the kids who are missing, please, in your prayers, their families, that they can be reunited before Christmas. And let's hope justice is served in this case. Let's hope law enforcement is able to get down to the nitty-gritty of what really happened to Sebastian Rogers. All right, till next time, may justice be served.